Welcome to part 3 of this character creation Blender tutorial series where we're creating this cartoon stylized penguin character. So in parts 1 and 2 we did all of the modeling, and so in this part we're going to be doing the lighting and the materials, and we will also be doing a little bit of texture painting. Now if you'd like to, you can use a drawing tablet for the texture painting, but you don't have to. I will just be using my mouse, but if you have a drawing tablet you could totally use that for the texture painting. And as I mentioned in the other parts, if you'd like to help support me and this channel, you can purchase the tutorial files on my Gumroad store, and you can also get the project files on my Patreon page. And checking out my Gumroad store and Patreon page are really great ways to help support me and this YouTube channel. And then just one other thing before we get started, I want to give a huge thanks to this video's sponsor, Sketchfab. Upload and preview your own 3D models on Sketchfab. My favorite feature of Sketchfab is that you can preview 3D models online in your browser. You can also purchase models and assets from Sketchfab's model store. You can use the model inspector to preview the wireframe, matte cap, textures, and more before you purchase. You can also apply to sell your own 3D models. Check out Sketchfab with the link below. Alright, so the first thing that I'm going to do in this part is delete the reference images because we don't actually need the reference images. So I'm going to press the 1 on the numpad, and that's going to take me to front view. And you can see right up here, here's the reference image that we added. You can't see it when you're looking in the perspective view, but then when you go into the orthographic perspective, you can press 5 on your numpad. That's going to take you to the orthographic perspective, or you can also press 1, 3, and 7 to go to front view, side view, and top view. Then you're able to see those reference images. So I don't need the reference images anymore, so I'm just going to press 1 on the numpad for front view. I'll press X to delete, and we can just delete that reference image. I can press 3 on the numpad for side view. I can just select that one, and I'll press X, and we're going to delete it. And then 7 on the numpad for top view. You can just select that one there, and we can delete it. All right, so let's press Control S to save. So now I'm going to be adding in an HDRI to get some nice lighting and reflections. And I talked about this HDRI at the beginning of the tutorial series, so it's a free HDRI from polyhaven.com, and I'll have the link in the video description to the one that I'm using if you'd like to download it and use the same one that I'm using. So to add it in, I'm going to go right over here to the world properties, and then if you don't already have a new world, you can just click on the new button and it's going to add a world. And then right here on the surface, on the color, I just want to click on this yellow dot because I don't want to use a color, I want to use an environment texture. So click on environment texture, and then we can just click on open to open it up. And here's the HDRI that I'll be using. So again, links in the description if you'd like to download it. So I downloaded the 1K version and the HDR version. And then you can just double click on it or just click on it to select it and click on open image. So that is going to add it in the world. Now I am going to be using the Eevee render engine. So if you'd like to use the Eevee render engine, you can click right over here on the render properties and just make sure the render engine is set to Eevee. Now everything in this tutorial will work both in Eevee and Cycles. So if you want to get a little bit more of a realistic render, then you could totally use Cycles. I'll be using Eevee because I know that there are a lot of people out there that don't have a super powerful computer, and so it makes sense to use Eevee because it'll render a lot faster, especially when you're rendering out the animation and you have to render all the frames, but you could totally use Cycles if you want a more realistic result. Alright, so I'm going to hold down the Z button, and then I'm going to move up to the rendered view and then let go of the Z button, and that's going to take us into the rendered view. So you can already see we have some really nice lighting here. We have like some yellow lighting and we have some blue lighting kind of over here. Now this definitely isn't as realistic as Cycles. If you were using the Cycles render engine, you would get even more realistic lighting, but it does look okay in Blender Eevee. Now I do want to add some more bright light because this HDRI, it doesn't really have any super bright light in one direction. You can kind of see there's like a sunset there, but it's not super bright. So I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to go right down here to light, and I want to add a sunlight. So now that I've added the sunlight, I can press G to grab, and I'm just going to move the sunlight up here just so that it's kind of out of the way. Now if I double tap the R key, that is going to enable the trackball rotation, and I can kind of rotate this around, and I want to rotate this over so that the light is kind of pointing right here. So it's kind of pointing down at the penguin, and it's rotating backwards so that the light is shining on the front of the penguin. So just something like that. And then also let's click right over here on the object data properties, and I'm going to turn the strength up right here. So I'm going to turn the strength up to like a 20 so that it's pretty bright. Now that does look really blown out and it looks super bright, but once we add materials, it's not going to look that that blown out. It just looks really bright now because we don't have any materials. It's just using a default white material in Blender. But I think 20 is a pretty good strength, and we can change that later if we need to. Now you could just leave the HDRI preview in the background, but I actually want to make the background transparent just so that it's not distracting and we can really just focus on the penguin character. So to make the background transparent, I'm going to click right over here on the render properties, and we're going to go right down here and we're going to open up the film tab. And then I'm going to click on the transparent button, and now that's transparent. So it's still giving us that lighting. If I just click on the lamp and press H to hide it, you can see it's still giving us that lighting, kind of bluish and yellowish. I'll press Alt H now, and that's going to unhide the light. So it will still light the scene, but the preview is just going to be transparent in the background. All right, so I'm now going to click on the body object, and we're first going to create a material for the body. So I'm going to click right over here on the shading tab, and that's going to take us to the shading workspace. And then I'm going to hold down the Z button, move up into rendered view and let go. And then let's click on new, and we're going to make a new material. So right here on the material name, I can just call this penguin. All right, now I want to add a texture because we're going to be doing some very basic texture painting on the penguin. So in order to do the texture painting, we need to create a texture that we can texture paint on. So to do this, I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to go to the search here, and I'm going to search for an image texture. Let's click on the image texture, and I'm going to drop it here. So we're now going to create a texture. So I'm going to click on the new button right here, and that is going to create a new texture. And when we click on that, it's going to bring up some settings. So we can first make the name. So I'm just going to call this penguin. And then I want to use a 4K image. I like to use 4K just so that it's very high quality. You don't have to use 4K if you don't want to. You could look up some different resolutions online of textures, but I'm going to be making a 4K texture. So what I'm going to do is click and hold, and then I'm going to drag down, and then I'm going to let go. What that's going to do is it's going to change both of the values at the same time. Now, what I want to do is I want to just have Blender do the math for me. So on default, it is giving us a 1K texture, 1024 by 1024. So it's about 1000 pixels on the width and the height. What I want to do is I want to make it a 4K texture. So what I'm going to do is hit that little star, the star right there, and then I'm going to type in 4 and then enter. And so what that's going to do is going to times the number by 4. So what we did is we hit star and then 4, and that's going to tell Blender to times this number by 4. So I'm going to press escape to undo that. So because we timed it by 4, it now is 4096 by 4096, and that is a very standard resolution for a 4K texture. Now for the color here, I'm just going to leave it fully black because I want my penguin to be black. You could totally change the color if you want the default color of the penguin to be something different. I'm going to just leave it as black, and then we will be texture painting a white belly on the penguin. All right, so those are the settings. I'm just going to click on OK, and so now we have this texture that we've created in Blender. So I want to plug the color up to the base color, and that way we're going to be able to preview it on the penguin, and you can already see that texture there. Now before we do the texture painting, there is one more thing that we need to do, and that is that we need to UV unwrap the mesh onto the texture. So before I do that, I need to apply the mirror. So I'm just going to make sure this object is selected, and I'm going to go right over here to the modifier properties, and then on the mirror modifier, I'm going to click on this drop down right here and click on apply. That will apply the mirror modifier. So if I tab into edit mode now, you can see there's actual geometry on both sides. And also we were going to need to apply the mirror modifier eventually because we're going to do the rigging, and so we need to apply the mirror modifier so that the arms can move separately. All right, so to UV unwrap this object, I'm going to go right over here to the UV editing workspace, and you can see that there's the 3D view right here, and then if you scroll out, here is the image that we actually added. So if you scroll right over here, you can see if you click right here, it's going to show you the different items that we've added, the different textures, and there's the different reference images, and there's also the penguin texture that we just created. And so if for some reason it hasn't selected that, just click right here and then click on the penguin texture. So we need to properly UV unwrap this so that the texture painting works properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press 1 on the numpad. That's going to take me to front view, and then I'm actually going to press 3 on the top of my keyboard to go to the face select. I'm now going to press A to deselect everything, and then I just want to select the front because I'm only going to be texture painting the front here. All the rest of the body and everything else I'm not going to be texture painting. I'm just going to be texture painting the belly on the front. So I'm going to press 1, and that's going to take me to the front view, and then make sure you're in the face select, and I'm going to press B for the box select, and I'm just going to box select all of the front faces. So now you can see that just the front faces are selected. And then I'll press 1 again to make sure I'm back in the front view. So I'm now going to press U, and U is going to bring up the UV mapping settings. And I want to go right down here, and I want to click on project from view. That way it's going to UV unwrap it from our view, and so you can see this right here is the exact same shape as this right here. So I now want to scale up this UV island right here, and I want to make it as big as I can so that we can get the most out of that 4K texture. Because if we scale it bigger, it's going to use more of that 4K resolution from the texture. So over here in the UV editing, I'm going to press the A key, and that's going to select the UV island. I'm now going to press S to scale, and I'm going to scale that up, and then I will press R to rotate. We're going to rotate this over, and G to grab, and then S to scale, and we're just going to make this as big as we can make it. Now, one really important thing is to make sure it's not overlapping or going over, because if it's going outside of the texture, then you can have problems with overlapping. So just go over here and make sure that it's not going outside of the texture. And also real quick, I should probably mention why we're UV unwrapping. So this is a 3D object, but a 2D texture is 2D, and so it's flat. So basically what we're doing is we're taking this 3D model and we're cutting it out and then placing it on something that's flat. So a good way to imagine it is to pretend that this penguin is made out of paper, and so it's like some 3D paper object, and what you want to do is you want to take scissors and you want to cut out the paper object, and then you want to lay it flat. So you have to basically create sort of like a 2D version of this object and put it flat. So that is what we're doing. So we're basically taking this 3-dimensional object and we're making it 2D, and we're flattening it onto this texture. So now what I want to do is I want to UV unwrap everything else. So what I'm going to do in the 3D space is press Control I. So Control I is going to select everything else. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press U again, but this time I'm just going to do this Smart UV Project. So when I do that, it's going to bring up these settings here, and I can just leave all these settings at the default and then click on OK. So Blender has basically just calculated it automatically, and so it's just gone around and kind of cut out some little pieces. So it's basically cut out all of these pieces and laid them down flat. Now I'm not going to be texture painting on any of these objects, so what I'm going to do is press A to select everything. Make sure your mouse is hovered over this view and press A, and then I can press G to grab, and I'm going to move them up. So now what I'm going to do is double tap the A key in the 3D space, and now you can see that we're able to see all those islands. So I now just want to take these little islands and I want to stick them around kind of in the corners here, kind of stick them around. I'm just going to make sure they're in the black areas because we're not going to be texture painting on them. So I'm going to press A to deselect everything in the UV editor, and then what I'm going to do is hover my mouse over these islands, and I'm going to press L. So L is going to select all of the linked vertices that are connected to those islands. So I can now press S to scale and G to grab, and I'm just going to stick it in the black area, and then I'll hover my mouse over another island and press L and L. I can press S to scale and G to grab and just kind of stick those down there, and I'll just continue to do that. So press L and then G to grab, S to scale, and you can also press R to rotate, and then you can press A to deselect everything, and then just continue to press L. And really what you can do is just select all of them. So just like box select all of them, and you can just like scale these all down and just kind of stick these right in here. If you do want to texture paint on these, then I would recommend making these all about an even size and evenly putting them all around. But as I said earlier, I'm just going to be texture painting on the front of the penguin, and so I just want to make the front of the penguin really big. All right, so just something like that is totally fine for our UV map. Let's press Control S again to save. All right, so we are now ready to do the texture painting. So Blender actually has a texture painting tab right here. So I'm just going to click on it, and it's going to pretty much set up everything for us. So right over here, we can actually texture paint on this flat object because we're in the image editor, but we can also texture paint on the actual penguin object. Now I'm going to click right here and drag this and make it smaller because I just want to texture paint on the actual penguin object. And then as I said earlier, you could totally use a drawing tablet if you'd like to. I often use a drawing tablet for texture painting because it's a lot easier and it's more fun, but you could totally just use a mouse if you don't have access to a drawing tablet. And if you're interested in purchasing a drawing tablet, I will have Amazon links in the video description to some drawing tablets that I recommend, and those are affiliate links. As an Amazon associate, I earn from qualifying purchases. So if you purchase something through those links, that will help me out, but with no extra cost to you. All right, so right over here, we have our brushes. So I'm actually just going to make sure I select this one, the default draw brush. And then what I also want to do is I want to scroll right here. So just move your mouse up here and then scroll with your scroll wheel, or you can also click and drag. And also if you're using a drawing tablet, you can click with your pen and then hold down and drag. And I'm going to bring it over here, and I want to turn on the symmetry X. This way, when I click and drag, drag and I start to paint, you can see that it's going to mirror it over to the other side because I want the penguin to look the same on both sides. I want the texture painting to look the same on both sides. Now another thing we can do is we can change the radius, so that's going to change the size of the brush. Now you can change it with the slider, or you can use the shortcut key. So the shortcut key is F. So if you press F, you can make that bigger, click to place that, or you can press F, make that smaller, and then click to place that. And now you can see the brush is smaller. Now there is one more thing that I want to do. You can see when I click and drag, you can see because I'm just using my mouse, it's kind of wobbly. I could try to make that a little bit smoother, but it's still kind of wobbly. And so I'm going to use a stabilized stroke. So what I'm going to do is press Control Z to undo that. I'm going to click right here on the stroke, and I can go right down here and you can see there is a stabilized stroke. So I'm going to click on that. Now if I click and drag, it's going to add a little tail. And so that little tail is going to make it very smooth. So it's basically going to follow along with your cursor, and you can see that is much more smooth. I'm going to press Control Z though to undo that. So then before we start texture painting, just make sure that the symmetry is turned on. I also want to turn the strength all the way up to 1. And then if you scroll right down here, or actually you can scroll right over here, the settings are up here, but they're also over here on the side as well. But I'm going to use the settings right up here. So right here, you can see there is a color, and just make sure that is fully white. All right, so let's start. So I'm going to click and drag, and I'm going to start to paint right there. And so where I'm adding the white area is right here on the side of the beak. So I'm gonna now navigate down here and add another stroke right there. Let's go back up here and kind of smooth that edge out, kind of like that. Okay, let's navigate down here. So as it comes out more, I want it to be more round and then just kind of be round right there. So let's keep going. So I'm going to click and drag, and I find that it is a lot easier and also more fun if you use a drawing tablet. So you could totally use a drawing tablet if you want to. For most texture paintings that I do, I definitely use a drawing tablet because it is just a lot easier. But for this tutorial, I'm going to use my mouse. And also why I'm doing that is because I don't want to accidentally go too far. I'd rather go further in than further out. So that's why I'm sometimes dragging back in. But we are going to fill this all in with white. So what I'm doing is just clicking and dragging using that stabilized stroke, and we're just making that round white area right there on the penguin's belly. So just kind of go along here, and I am going to thicken that up a little bit. Now we will be filling this in with a bigger brush, so you don't need to fill it in right now, but just kind of try to get the basic shape. So something like that, just kind of zoom out there and see how that is looking. And I do think I want it to come out a little bit more here. So I'm going to click and drag, or use your pen and just kind of make that a little bit bigger. That is pretty good. I think I just want to make it a little bit bigger. So I'm going to click and drag and make it a little bit bigger like that and like that. Okay, there we go. Let's see how that's looking. That's pretty good for now. So I'm going to fill this area all in. So if you want to, you could just like zoom out and just like go like that. But that's actually kind of hard to do. And also with the stabilized stroke, it's a bit annoying. So what I'm going to do is edit the brush so that it's easier to just fill that in. So I'm going to click right up here on stroke, and I want to turn off the stabilized stroke. I'm just going to click on that to turn it off. And then I'm going to go right over here to the fall off. So I'm going to click on the fall off, and right now is just set to this custom, just this default one. What I want to do is I want to click on this right here, and I want to instead change this to consistent. So this way, if I zoom in here, and I can also press the F key to change my brush size. Now if I click and drag, you can see that the fall off is consistent. So there isn't any smoothing. This is very smooth, whereas this is really sharp. So for most things, you wouldn't really want to use this because it looks so sharp, you're able to like see the pixels. But because I'm just filling this in, I want to use the consistency. I want to be very consistent. So I'm just gonna now click and drag and fill this all in. And also one really important thing, make sure you don't close Blender until you have saved the image, because this texture painting right here, this is all still just in the Blender file, but we haven't actually saved this as an external file to our computer. So if you need to close Blender, you'll need to save this image by clicking right here on image and then click on it, save as. We will save it in a moment though, because we are almost done. So I'm just going to click and drag and just kind of fill all of that in, and then go along here and be careful. Just kind of fill that in, zoom in here. Oh, and I went too far and that looks kind of sharp. So I'll press Control Z. Control Z will undo that. And then just fill that all in. Okay, and then right up here, let's fill this all in. And then if you want to actually just kind of paint on the side here, you can go to the fall off, click on the consistent, and you can change it back to custom. And then that's going to use a much more smooth brush if you want to just go along the edge there and kind of make the edge a little bit bigger. So now just painting that in, and now the penguin's mouth is going to open, and so there is a possibility that you might be able to see kind of behind there a little bit. So what I'm going to do is actually hide these objects and then paint back there. So I'm going to click back over here on the layout, and then I'm going to click on this object, and I'll press H to hide it. Click on this object, press H to hide it, and then we can click on the tongue and press H to hide it. So I'm now going to click back on this object, make sure this object is selected, and I'm going to click back over on the texture painting workspace. So now what I can do is I can just paint in here and kind of fill this all in. So I'm going to press F to change my brush size and then just go along there, just kind of filling that all in. So I'm just going to make it very sharp there. And this is kind of where the mouth is, so you're probably not going to see this, but just in case, I am going to paint that all in there. Let's see, maybe just kind of sharpen this up by making a smaller brush and just kind of painting in there. Sharpen that up. All right, and that is good for the texture painting. So don't close the Blender file. Make sure you save this image before you close the Blender file, because if you close the Blender file right now, you're going to lose this data. So to save this, you're just going to open up this side thing right here, and then you're going to click on Image, and we're going to click on Save As. And then I'm just going to save this as Penguin, although I will actually change the file format right here to a JPEG. If you press the N key, that is going to open and close this. I'm going to change it to JPEG, and then I'll just leave the quality at 90. And the JPEG file format is going to be a smaller file size, and then the quality, if you change it to 90, it'll just compress the file a tiny bit, but you're not going to notice any difference in the quality. And that way the file size will be smaller. And I'm just going to save this in the folder with my other project files, and then I'll click on Save As. So now that we've saved this image, it's saved as an external file on our computer. And so if we close the Blender file, Blender won't lose the data. Let's press Ctrl S again to save, and we're now done with the texture painting, so we can go back over here to the shading tab. Let's go back to the shading tab and see how that's looking. That's pretty cool. So I can press Alt H, and Alt H will unhide those objects. All right, there we go. So I now just want to do a few things just to kind of edit the shading nodes. So I'm going to make this a bit smaller. So one thing that I want to do is just add a little bit of subsurface just to let a little bit of light through. So what I'm going to do right here on the subsurface is I'm just going to change the subsurface up to a 0.1. So not very much subsurf, just a little bit. And that's just going to allow a little bit of light to go through. You can kind of see in the shadow there, you can kind of see that how that's looking. Now it's making it really bright and white. So right here on the subsurface color, if I make this a bit bigger, you can see it says subsurface color. I'm going to make this fully black. Now you might think that that's not doing anything, but it still is doing a lot. You can see right there, we have that little kind of red look right there. And there's also a little bit of softness right there. So just by turning that subsurface up, it'll just make it look a little bit more organic. And then I also want to take this roughness and turn this down to like a 0.4, just to make like the fur or the feathers a little bit more shiny. And then also I do want to turn the specular down, because the specular is going to change like how reflective it is. And right now it's really reflective. It almost looks like metallic or something, and it's really bright. So on the specular value here, I'm just going to change it to like a 0.2. And now you can see that that is much darker. So you're able to see that actual color better, and it's not quite as reflective. All right, so now I want to create the rest of the materials. So I'm going to first click on the little bit of hair here, and I'm going to now click right over here to add a new material. And I actually want to add the penguin material. So I'm going to click on the penguin material, but I don't want to use the penguin texture on this material, because you can actually see right here, there's a little bit of that texture there. So what I'm going to do is actually duplicate this material. So to duplicate this material, I'm going to click on this button right here, and that is going to duplicate it, but it's going to keep all the same data. So now it says penguin.001. So I'm just going to rename this to penguin black. So now that this is a separate material, we can change the data and it's not going to mess up the other texture. So I'm going to click on this penguin texture and I'll press X to delete it. And then the base color, I'm just going to make this fully black. But now it still has all the other settings with the subsurface and the roughness and specular. All right, so that's really good. And so I now want to add that same exact material to this object right here, the eyebrows. So I'm going to click on the drop down right here and we're going to add the penguin black material. Let's press Ctrl S again to save. All right, so now let's do the eyes. So I'm going to select the eyes here. Let's click on new, and I can just call this eyes white. So we're going to be creating two different materials for the eyes white and the eyes black. So for the base color right here, I'm just going to make this fully white, so it's very bright. And then I want to turn the roughness all the way down to 0, so it's more shiny. because I do want the eyes to look wet and shiny and reflective. So now I need to add those little black pupils. So I'm going to press Tab to go into edit mode, and I just want to select the part of the object that I want to be black. So I'm going to press 3 on the top of my keyboard. If you scroll over here, you can also click right here, and then I'm going to press A to deselect everything. I'm now going to press B for the box select, and I'm going to click and drag and just add a box around there, and that's just going to select those faces. So I now want to add a new material in the slot, so it's actually kind of easier to do it over here. So I'm going to go right down here to the material properties, and you can see here's the eyes white. So I need to add another material in this object's material slot so we can have 2 materials. So to do that, I'm going to click on this plus right here, and then I'm going to click on the drop down, and I'm actually going to add the eyes white. Now I don't want to use the eyes white, I want to duplicate this and then make it black. So to duplicate it, I'm going to click on this button right here, the little file icon. That's going to duplicate the material, but it'll keep the same information. So I can now double click on this to rename it, and I'm going to rename it to eyes black. Let's press Control S again to save our project. And now I want to click on the eyes black, make sure that is selected, and then also make sure that that is selected right there, those faces in the very middle. And then I'm going to click on the assign button, and that is going to assign that material to those faces. Now it doesn't really look like anything's happened, but that's because it looks like the exact same material. So I can just click on the base color right here and make it fully black. And now you can see that he has those pupils there, and that's looking really nice. Now, one thing that I want to do is I want to make it less reflective because it's like reflecting the HDRI, and that doesn't really look realistic. It's kind of weird how reflective it is. You can kind of like see the sky and everything. So to make it less reflective, I'm going to take the specular, and I'm just going to change that down to like a 0.2. And if you wanted to, you could turn up the roughness a little bit. If you wanted to, I think I will just turn the roughness up a little bit to maybe just like a 0.1. So it's just a little bit more rough. All right, so that is the eye material, and you can see that it's really giving a lot of life to the character, adding in those eyes. All right, so we just have a few more materials to make. We need to create the tongue material, because you can see there is the tongue, and then we also need to create the orange material for the beak and the feet. So let's just click on this object right here. I'm going to click on new, and I could just call this material beak, or I could just rename it to orange. All right, now the base color right here, I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to make it a orangey color. So a pretty bright orange and pretty bright. And also, if you want to use the exact same color that I'm using, you can go over the hex value and you can type in this hex value. So the hex value that I'm using is F2 7200. That's the orange color that I'm using. And then also on the subsurface color, I'm going to click on this because I do want to add some subsurface just to let a little bit of light through and make it look a bit more organic. So I'm going to make the subsurface color like a bright red, just something like that, maybe make it a bit brighter. And then I also need to turn the subsurface up. So I'm going to turn the subsurface up to like a 0.2, and that way it's just going to allow a little bit of light to go through. So you can see that is looking now a bit more smooth and organic. And then I also want to turn the roughness value down. So on the roughness here, I'm just going to turn this down to like a 0.4 so that it's a little bit more shiny. All right, so now I want to click on this beak right here. I'm going to click on the drop down and I'm going to add the orange, and then I'm going to go right down here. We're going to click on the feet. Let's click right here on the drop down and we're going to add the orange. All right, there we go. That's looking super awesome. So I'm just going to now select this object right here, and I'm going to press H to hide it, and that way we can see the tongue. So I'm going to click on the tongue, and let's do the tongue material. So I'm going to click on new here. We can just call this tongue. All right, so for this color, I'm just going to click on the base color, and I'm going to make this a red color, and then I'll make it a little bit darker, so something like that. And then I definitely want to add subsurface to this to make it look more fleshy. So I'm going to turn the subsurface up to like a 0.2, and then to make it look kind of more like a tongue, I'm going to click on the subsurface color and make it kind of a pinky color, and that way it's going to allow a bit of pink to come through there, maybe not quite that saturated, and maybe a little bit more red. So there we go, kind of a stylized cartoony tongue material. And then let's also make it a bit more shiny, so I'm going to turn the roughness maybe to just like a 0.4 so it's a little bit more shiny. And also I think I'll make this subsurface color just a little bit darker. All right, so I can now press Alt H to unhide that, and there we go. All right, so let's go back to the layout here, and then I'm going to press Control S to save. So there we have it. So there is the finished character. So we've done all of the modeling and all the materials for the penguin character. So in the next part, in part 4, we're going to get started with the rigging. So thank you so much for watching this tutorial. I hope you've been enjoying it so far, and I will have part 4 right up there on the end screen and also the link in the video description. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in part 4.